Hey, what's up? Hello. If you're new here, my name is Kayla and you're watching Kayla's Bookish Vibes. In today's video, we are going to be doing our October reading wrap up. I read 8 books in the month of October, and it's been a while since I've actually read that many books in a month's time. Granted, October is one of our longest months, so I'm attributing it to that. But I also read a few novellas and I also read some books on audio. So I'm also going to attribute that to the fact that I read 8 whole books this month, which is crazy. So without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and get into the books and what I thought of them. I think I wanna start with the books that I read on Kayonce first. If you don't know, if you're new here, Kayonce is the name of my Kindle. And I did read 2 novellas and I checked out a book from the library on my Kindle this month. So the first novella I read was by Gray Huffington and it is called Liam. It's the 4th book in the Eisenberg Effect series. I never give these books ratings because I feel like I would be too harsh with my rating. I don't know what it is about the Eisenberg effect in the series in general, but I have just been loving to hate those books. Luca was the only one that I really enjoyed, and even that one I had like problems with like the writing, and it's not like the most well-written book ever. I mean, it could have used more editing. I think all of her books could use more editing. But aside from that, like the stories in general, I don't know what it is. It's like I have a love-hate relationship with them. I always read these books knowing that I'm going to nitpick them to death, but I still need to read them. Like I wanted to finish the series so bad. So anyway, I read Liam's story, the 4th book, which is the father of the 3. So the first book is Luca, the second book is Lyric, and she's like the sister to Luca. And then the 3rd book is Lake, and he's the brother of the 2. And then Liam is the dad. I think another reason that I'm not necessarily like the hugest or the biggest fan of these books is because I'm not someone who's like into a lot of smut, and these books do have like, they're pretty smut heavy. There's still a plot there, like there's still a storyline for all of the books, but I've just come to accept that I'm not someone who really enjoys a lot of smut, and you're going to get a lot of smut when you read Gray Huffington's books. The story that you get with Liam is kind of like how there's a cliffhanger at the end of Lake, and you kind of like go into the cliffhanger in Liam. So you kind of figure out what happens after that cliffhanger in the 3rd book. So obviously I can't even really tell you what Liam is about. Just know that I read it. I'm glad I finished the series. There are 2 more books after. They're not technically part of the same series, but they do kind of like, you know, mesh together. Will I read them? Yes, because like I said, it's like a love. I have to know now. Like I'm invested, I guess you could say. I'm invested, so I want to know, but I just know I'm going to nitpick those books. Like I'm going to have a problem with the way that it's written. I'm going to have a problem with the repetitive nature of her writing. Like she repeats a lot of things. She goes into a lot of detail that you just don't need all the details. Like if the character is going upstairs to take a shower, she is going to describe how many steps it took to go up the stairs. She is going to describe them putting their hand on the doorknob to turn it. She's going to explain like them getting out their clothes to get into the shower, what they picked out to wear for pajamas. She's going to tell you the temperature of the water. Like it's just a bit much, but I'm so invested in the stories and the characters and like what their life is that I want to continue reading. So I probably will read Ledge and Law, which is like a spin-off series of this, but I read Liam, no stars. I don't have ratings for her books. I will never have a rating for Gray Huffington. It just is what it is. The next book I read, speaking of Gray Huffington, was Ever, which is another novella within that universe. Ever was the female main character in the 1st book, Luca, and you just kind of get like this story was like about her postpartum journey. I was really enjoying this little novella until we got to the part where I felt like, because it was a novella, it wasn't fleshed out. So it just kind of felt like she was doing a really good job at explaining how postpartum depression can affect women after giving birth. And Ever has a lot of kids. She got 11 kids, and she was going through postpartum depression. And I kind of felt like she was doing a really good job at explaining what that can look like and feel like for someone. And then it was just like a switch flipped, and all of a sudden she is being whisked away to this lavish vacation, and that is what has cured her of her postpartum depression. I'm going to attribute that to the fact that it was a novella and that she didn't have enough time to flesh that out. I really do wish that she would have dedicated more time to that book, because I feel like that's a really important topic that could have been just better fleshed out. It could have been better explained. But I enjoyed my time with that one for the most part. Again, no ratings for Greg Huffington. And then the third book that I read on my Kindle was Family by J. California Cooper. Now earlier I guess it was like last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, I purchased the book by J. California Cooper because one of my favorite YouTubers, booktubers, she really enjoys that author, and I wanted to check something out by her. And I had every intention of reading that book, but it was a series of short stories and I wasn't in the mood for a series of short stories. So I looked on Libby to see what I could check out and read instantly, you know, with Libby, by J. California Cooper, and the book Family was available. And it wasn't a series of short stories, it was just like a novel. So I clicked that one and I ended up loving it. I gave that book 4.5 stars. Thinking back on it now, I think I may give it 5. I think I may give it 5 stars. This was the perfect book to read, especially also during this season, because I was reading a lot of like horror novels this month, and like thrillers and stuff. And so I was kind of wanting to take a step back from that, which is why I was like, let me get into J. California Cooper. But the book that I read still kind of like really resonated with the October months and the spooky season. So in this book, it is a slave narrative. We are following a slave who makes a decision for her and her family, and it results in her dying. However, the book is still from her point of view because she essentially becomes almost like a ghost, and you're getting her point of view, and she's viewing like her family's life, her children's lives and her grandchildren's lives, and like what happens to them after she leaves, after she dies. She's not necessarily a ghost, and she even explains it like she's stuck in the in-between. She can't really she can't talk to them, she can't interact with them, she can't let them know in any way that she's there. She's just there, and she's like witnessing everything that's happening, and we're getting her point of view. So like that eeriness of the fact that we're getting this story from someone who has taken their life but is still very much stuck in what they were trying to escape, and they're still having to view like what's happening to their family. It was perfect. I love the way it was written. I love the dialect that J. California decided to write in, like just the way that the words are written, that you can actually hear the accent, I guess specific to the time period and specific to the area that these people are in. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. And my favorite YouTuber, or one of my favorite booktubers, Lex, even says that one of the things she loves about J. California Cooper's writing is her dialect, and now I can completely see why, and I completely agree. I loved that book so much, and I had just picked it up on a whim. It wasn't even like I was planning to read this book, and I love when that happens, when you just randomly pick up a book, read it, and love it. I think I read that book in 2 days. It's not very long, but I just couldn't put it down, and then when I did put it down, I needed to get right back to it to figure out what was happening. So Family by J. California Cooper, highly recommend if you are into historical fiction, if you are into slave narratives. There are some hard and harsh things that happen in that book, but I absolutely loved it. 5 stars. We're giving it 5, okay? Because now that I'm thinking about how I feel about the book, for me, a 5-star book is a feeling, and I get 5-star feelings from that book. So we're gonna give Family 5 stars. Those are all the books that I read on my Kindle. Now the book that I read on audio, I read 2 books on audio this month. The first one being A Talent for Murder by Peter Swanson. This was my book of the month pick. I don't know which month I picked this book. I just know I picked it and I read it on audio. This was very short. Perfect book to read in the month of October. I think I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars. And I'm trying to remember what it's about because I read this book in the beginning of October. That was 31 days ago. Oh, I know what it's about. So there is a lady who is like newly married, and she believes that her husband, who travels a lot for work, has been killing people on his travels for work. She believes that he is up to something, and that everywhere he goes, like each city that he goes to for work, somehow there's a murder that ends up happening there. So she's starting to suspect him. Well, she calls her friend, her college friend, who seems to help get her out of trouble. She calls her because she thinks like, am I crazy for thinking this, or is this actually happening, and can you help me figure it out? And we kind of go from there. I enjoyed this. I do believe this is a continuation, or it's like part of a series by Peter Swanson. I've never read the other books in the series, but I will say you don't have to read them. You won't feel lost at all. But I will say I could tell that there may have been like some history with our female main character that I was missing because I haven't read the other books. for me, that was fine. I'm trying to look up the name of the series, guys. I'm doing a lot here. So I guess it's called the Henry Kimball and Lily Kittner series. That's what it is on Goodreads. The first book is The Kind Worth Killing, which I've heard really good things about that book. And then the second book in that series is The Kind Worth Saving. And I guess this is the third book in that series, which is A Talent for Murder. So I'm assuming you meet Lily's character in book 1. And you may also even meet Henry Kimball in book 1. Both of those characters are present in this book. And I loved Lily's character, so I may backtrack and read the first 2 because I really enjoyed her character. I also enjoyed the audiobook experience, and I think the narrator's voice for Lily was spot on. It was just perfect with her personality. It was very almost like monotone in a way, but it was kind of creepy how monotone and matter of fact she was, because there were some things that she was doing in this book, and it was just like, I can't believe you're so nonchalant about what you're doing. But I think the narrator's voice made it even more creepy. Really enjoyed this book, and I do think I'm going to go back and listen to the first 2 books in that series. Again, I gave this one a 3.5. The next audiobook that I read was Delicious Monsters by Lizelle Samberry. I really enjoyed this book. This is a YA, I believe it's considered horror, and it is about a haunted house. It's about so much more than that, but I want to give you as little about the synopsis as I possibly can because I don't want to ruin this book for you. And I kind of went into this book blind. All I knew about this book was that it involved a haunted house and it was YA. And I think that's really all you need to know. I ended up giving this book a 4-star. I really enjoyed it. I think I even gave it a 4.5, possibly. It was really close to a 5-star, but I didn't get the 5-star feeling from this book. But we are following a young girl who lives in Canada. She's Canadian. They live in Canada. She lives with her mom, and they're like lower middle class. They share like a studio apartment, but they inherit this house that's like in the country of Canada, and they end up moving to this house and running an Airbnb out of it. However, the house is haunted. So as you can imagine, there's some ghosts there. Also, our female main character, the young lady that we are following, her name is Daisy. She can see ghosts, and there are lots of ghosts everywhere, but especially in this haunted house. So as you can imagine, if you're running an Airbnb out of a haunted house where there are ghosts, some things are going to go awry, and they do. I really enjoyed this. It had so much more to say than just being a haunted house. This book talks a lot about toxic mother relationships. I really enjoyed the way that it explored that, and in more than one way. Like there was more than one toxic mother relationship, and a familial relationship in general, how like the toxicity can spread throughout that and be passed from generation to generation if it is not snipped at the root. I really enjoyed this book. This book also made me interested in these birds. There were like a very specific type of bird in this book that were just super creepy. So I did a lot of research on those birds, and I think I want to share that with my boys. I just have to figure out how to share it with them in a way that's not going to scare them, because these birds are kind of creepy. So 4.5, highly recommend. I enjoyed the audiobook experience. It wasn't like a super produced audiobook, but I did enjoy the narrator's voice for this book. Now, the 3 books that I read physically, okay? I read 3 books physically this month. We'll start with the longest one. Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. This is the 2nd book in the Empyrean series. I wish I could say that I read the whole book in the month of October. I did not read this like from page 1 to the end in the month of October. I think I read maybe like 20% of this book on audio like 3 months ago. 3 months ago, and I just put it down and never went back to it. I had planned on finishing it on audio, but I don't like the audiobook. I feel like the audiobook is too overproduced, and I think there are 2 versions of the audiobook. I would suggest the one that's not like super overproduced, and what I mean by that is like there's sound effects, like when they're walking through the woods or something, like you can hear their footsteps and the leaves crunching, and for me that is so distracting. It is extremely distracting to hear like all the special sound effects. So I realized like there's no way I'm going to be able to read that. And when I was reading along physically with the book, like while I was listening to the audio, I realized it wasn't reading every word in the book. It would leave some stuff out, and it wasn't enough to like change the story or anything. But I wanted to read like the actual book. I want you to read word for word when I'm listening to the audio. So I guess it was kind of like an abridged version, and I don't want that. I wanted like the full experience of reading the book. So I decided to put that down and just read it physically. Again, there is a 2nd version of the audiobook that's not abridged. It doesn't have all of those sound effects. So if you want to read it on audio, you still can and not miss out on anything. But I just decided I retain fantasy so much more when I read it physically. I don't do good with reading fantasy on audio. So I would say I read about 80% of this book physically this month, and I actually enjoyed this book. I gave it 3.5, which is a far cry from the 5-star that I gave Fourth Wing, but I enjoyed my time with it. It did drag. I think a lot of people's reviews that I've seen so far I have agreed with. It was like when things were happening, they were happening and I was engaged. I was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? And then there were like long periods of time where it was just kind of drawn out and we were waiting for something to happen. So, and I felt like it was a lot of filler, but I do love the way that this book ended, and I cannot wait for book 3 to come out in January. I will be continuing on with this series. 3.5 though, I wasn't nearly as obsessed with this book as I was with the first one, but I do plan on continuing the series. And this is a chunker, okay? Even reading 80% of this book physically, I was just like, if I had loved that book as much as I loved the first book, I wouldn't complain about it being so long, but I was just like, I'm not as obsessed with it as I was with the first one. The next book I read physically, and it is called What You Leave Behind by Wanda M. Norris. This is a thriller. Loved my time with this book. Ended up giving it 4-star. The 4 stars that I'm giving it isn't necessarily like because it was just written so well and it's like a masterfully written book, even though it is well written. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying the feelings I have for this book and the subject matter is what's making me give it a 4. So take my rating with this one with a grain of salt. You may not agree with me, and that's fine, but I love this book because of what it was inspired by, and that's what made me pick the book up. I was really intrigued with the subject matter even before picking it up, like on my own. And then when I realized what this book was about, I was like, yeah, I have to read it because I really want to know how she turns this into a thriller. And I'm going to leave a video link down below. Me and my husband actually just watched this video. It's on YouTube, so you can easily watch it, but I will leave it linked down below for you. It's called A Vanishing History, Gullah Geechee Nation. I'm going to leave it linked down below for you. But this book essentially talks about the Gullah Geechee people and how land is being taken from them, either just being straight up stolen from them by big corporations. The land is being given away and sold due to negligence or just plain ignorance. But I love the way that she turned this into a thriller. So essentially we are following a lawyer who has come back to her hometown to kind of regroup. She just suffered from a divorce, and I believe she also lost her job. So she's having like a really hard go at life, and she just needs like a day cleanse. So she goes back to her hometown, and it was either in Georgia or South Carolina. I want to say it was in Georgia though. Yes, it was in Georgia. So she goes back to her hometown for a fresh start, and while she's just like walking along, trying to clear her mind because she's also grieving after losing her mother, she runs into an old man and his dog. And this old man is very ornery. He's upset that she's on his property, and he mistakes her for someone that she is not. So after she tries to finally convince this man, I'm not who you think I am, he lets her go. But now she's just thinking about this man and his land, and she goes back to check on him, only he's no longer there. And instead his land is now being sold, and no one knows where he is, or no one can even recall when they've last seen him. So she kind of goes into like this amateur sleuth mode where she tries to find out what happens to this man and why is his property up for sale. Loved this book. Again, I love what it's really talking about, like the core of the book. Again, I will leave that video link down below. You should watch it. So yeah, I'm also really invested, I think, in that whole subject matter because it kind of hits home for me in like a very personal way. So I really enjoyed this one. I ended up giving it 4 stars. Highly recommend. And it's a thriller. So even if you don't watch the video link down below, even if you don't care about land grabs and like literally the theft of an entire culture, if that's not something that interests you and you just want to read a good thriller, that is still just a really good thriller at heart. You can look past all of that, choose not to do any further research, and still really enjoy that book for the thriller that it is. And then I think the last book that I have to mention with you is this book is funny. I think I did a reading vlog with this book. There's No Way I Die First by Lisa Springer. This is a very unhinged horror novel slasher. It is YA. It is about a deranged clown who has been invited to this Halloween party of high schoolers, and these are like high society high schoolers. They go to a very private school, and their parents have lots of money. They're just very privileged kids, and they're having a Halloween party. The host of this party invites all of the elite people in her school. It's like 12 of them, I believe, and the clown that she hires ends up being like an actual killer clown, and he's killing the kids at the party. I know that sounds so dark, but the way this is written is so unserious that it's not near, I mean, it is people are dying in this book, don't get me wrong, like people are dying. The clown is killing people, but it's just so unserious. You can't take the villain serious in this book at all. And it was a good time. I don't know how else to explain that. It was a very good time. I enjoyed my time with this book. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I think you should read it. You may not enjoy it the way that I did. You may think like this is too ridiculous, like it's not something that I'm going to enjoy, but I think you should give it a try anyway. I loved it. Some of the scenes I had to read back to my husband because they were just, how did she think of this is what I'm thinking. Like, how did Lisa Springer think of some of the ways and some of the scenarios that happened in this book? I will never know, but I'm going to be picking up whatever Lisa Springer puts down, because I just want to know what else can she think of? Like, what other ridiculous situation can she come up with? I loved it. 4 stars. And if you're looking for a very unserious thrasher novel, then you should give this one a try. Highly recommend. Those are all the books that I read this month. That was 8 books. I'm shocked that I read this many books, and some of them are actually kind of long. Granted, I did read one of the long ones on audio, but these 2 books alone are like some pretty big chunkers. And then there were some short ones in there. They didn't take me long at all to read. So I think I had a good balance. I had 2 novellas, so those were like super short to read, but it was a really good reading month. I enjoyed I think I enjoyed every book that I read for the month of October. There were none that I like hated, none that I felt like deserved less than a 3 stars. So it was a win. It was a really good reading month. Thank you so much if you stayed until the very end. And if you also noticed, some of these books were on my fall TBR. And y'all know when it comes to a TBR, Kayla is not going to follow it. But I've been following it, okay? There were a few books here that I said I wanted to read in the fall spooky months, and we're reading them. I can still read more in the month of November. We'll see if I can get to them. My shelves are still empty, but I did pull some books that I want to get to, and I'm hoping that because these books are out on my shelf, they'll be the ones that I gravitate towards. And so the rest of my TBR is sitting back there. So we'll see if I can get to the rest of them in the month of November. If you read any of these books, let me know what you thought about them down below without giving any spoilers. Thank you so much if you made it to the very end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you did make it to this point in the video, please leave this emoji to let me know that you stayed until the very end. And I will see you guys in my next video.